Since the expansion era began in 1967, only 2 players have ever captained their team to back-to-back Stanley Cup final losses. The first was Al Arbour, the captain of the newly formed St. Louis Blues. 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances and 3 straight losses, spanning from 1968 to 1970. But that was an expansion team. It was a roster of cast-offs thrown together. No one expected greatness from them, which makes what happened over 50 years later even harder to explain. Because the next name on that list is none other than Connor McDavid, the best player of this generation, the face of the league, and now the captain of a team that just lost back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, both at the hands of the Florida Panthers. He's now 10 years deep into what was supposed to be a legendary career, and don't get me wrong, the individual accolades that he has are ridiculous. At just 28 years old, he's already racked up 1,100 points, 5 Art Rosses, 4 Ted Lindsays, 3 Harts, a Rocket, and a Conn Smythe. If you listed those achievements with no context, you'd assume he had at least 1 Stanley Cup, if not 2. But that's the problem, because if Connor McDavid retired today, he wouldn't be remembered for all the trophies that he got in the regular season. He'd be remembered for being the guy who was so good and still never got it done when it mattered. And that's where things get complicated, because no one wants to talk about this side of McDavid, the side where he leads the playoffs in scoring, breaks records that have stood for over 40 years, plays like the best hockey player on earth, and still it's not enough. This was supposed to be his year, the moment he finally silenced every doubt. Instead, it ended the same way as the year before, with someone else lifting the cup. Now, the questions are getting louder. Was this his best shot? Is this team built to do it again? Will his legacy be defined by what he's accomplished or what he never was able to? Because at some point, the narrative shifts. It shifts from it's coming to why hasn't it? And right now, no one in hockey faces more pressure to answer that question than Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid's brilliance over the course of our regular season is never the question. He dominates, skates circles around defenders, and constantly finishes atop the scoring race. Over the last 3 seasons, McDavid has been historic. In 2023, he delivered a season for the ages. 64 goals, 89 assists, 153 points. It was the highest point total in the salary cap era, and the most by any player since Mario Lemieux did it in 1995. Art Ross, Hart, Rocket Richard, and Ted Lindsay. He won them all. It felt like he hit a level that no one else could even match. And then came 2024. No, it wasn't 150 points again, but he still racked up 132 points in just 76 games. And then recently, he just had a measly 100-point season while missing 15 games, but that's still on pace for over 120. That's why the regular season dominance, as historic as it's been, is starting to hit a wall. He has proved everything that he can from October up until April, but it's what happens between May and June that separates great from immortal. And McDavid is still on the wrong side of that line. He's had dominant playoff moments before, obviously. I mean, these past 2 seasons, he was unreal for about 90% of the postseason. But when the spotlight is at its brightest, when the Stanley Cup is within reach, something changes. Across 2 straight Stanley Cup finals, the biggest games of his career, McDavid has failed to deliver. In 2024, he helped lead the Oilers back from a 3-0 series deficit to force Game 7. But when it mattered most, he disappeared. He registered no points in Game 6 and no points in Game 7. Then in 2025, it was more of the same. Over Games 3 through 6, he managed just 2 points total. And in the decisive Game 6, with the cup on the line, he finished -4 with a goose egg in the box score. Now, I'm not saying he was bad through these playoff runs. He set records, led both them in scoring, and won a Conn Smythe when he lost the series. But his numbers in crucial moments are definitely concerning. These are the moments that make or break legacies. These are the games where legends show up and they take over. And right now, McDavid hasn't done that. It's not about effort or skill, it's about showing up when it matters. And for all the amazing stuff that he did to get there, when the spotlight was the brightest, the best player in the world went quiet. And sure, he's facing the best defenders in the world and the best forechecks in the world, but that's what happens in the Stanley Cup final. Every all-time great had to deal with elite shutdown guys. Crosby, Ovechkin, Gretzky, Messier, Jagr, the list goes on. They all had targets on their backs, and yet they still found ways to break through. And a lot of those guys broke through early in their careers. Sidney Crosby was the youngest captain to ever lift the Stanley Cup, being just 21 years old when he actually won his revenge tour. He lost to the 2008 Red Wings, then came back and beat them in 7 the next year. Gretzky was a lot of the same. He lost to the 83 Islanders, who are one of the best teams of all time, then came back to the Cup final to take them down as a 23-year-old. Lemieux won his first Cup in 1991 as a 25-year-old, Bobby Orr at 22, Gordie Howe at 22, Mark Messier at 23, Jagr at 19. It goes on. If McDavid does win in his career, he's going to fall into the tier of guys like Yzerman, Ovechkin, and Bork. Legendary players, but they got over the hump later in their career. It would be a massive relief and a well-earned reward after years of dominance, but winning late doesn't really carry the same legacy-defining weight as winning young and doing it again and again does. It might save his resume, it might bring him peace, but it might not put him on hockey's Mount Rushmore. But we shouldn't really be freaking out because McDavid still has time, but how much does he have exactly? He's in his prime, and the team around him just made 2 deep playoff runs to the Stanley Cup final. For a long time, people said he didn't have enough help. Now he does. The core of this Oilers squad is as strong as it's ever been in the McDavid era, but if they don't get it done in the next couple seasons, that chance could be as good as gone. That's because the biggest challenge for the Oilers is actually off the ice and on the books. Evan Bouchard is probably going to want a massive contract, likely somewhere around that $10 million range, and McDavid hits free agency in 2026. And on top of McDavid's contract expiring, there's talks that he might opt for a shorter-term deal instead of a typical 8-year contract that you see a lot of star players sign, and that could create even more uncertainty for the team's future, and that window starts to look even smaller. Most dynasties are not built after 30, and a lot of this roster is already at or near that age. And with all of this uncertainty hanging over the team's future, it begs the question, can McDavid win in Edmonton? Most hockey legends won with the team that they started with. Gretzky and Messier with the Oilers, Crosby, Lemieux, Jagr with the Penguins, or with the Bruins. Even those who won later in their careers, like Yzerman and Ovechkin, they stuck with their drafted franchise because they knew it would mean more to them than hopping from team to team ring chasing. If McDavid were to end up leaving Edmonton, it could be seen as him walking away from the team that built him. And a lot of other people are saying that he might have a better shot at winning the Cup somewhere else, but I don't think there's any other team that would give him a better chance than the team that's been to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. But eventually, I could see him going somewhere else that might give him a better shot at winning the Cup, but it may taint his legacy. Then again, McDavid probably doesn't care what other people think about his legacy. For him, it could simply be about finally winning the Cup. Moving on might improve his chances, but it also means taking a big gamble on how he'll be remembered. And that is the tough reality that McDavid might be facing. He'll retire with a trophy case full of individual accolades, multiple Art Ross trophies, multiple Hart trophies, countless 120-plus point seasons, but without a Stanley Cup, it still might not be enough. We've seen it before. Joe Thornton and Marcel Dionne put up massive numbers throughout their career, but without a ring, they've been left out of the top 10. But McDavid, he's not like Dionne or Thornton. If he never wins a cup, he won't just fall into that same category, he'll end up in a tier of his own. The gap between his talent and his resume would be unlike anything we've ever seen. Because players as good as him, they always win a cup. It's not really a choice. And if that kind of player walks away without a championship, it'll be one of the biggest what-ifs in NHL history. McDavid's career isn't over, but the margin for error is shrinking. The team around him is aging and the cap is tightening, and the expectations, they have not gone anywhere. He's still in his prime, still capable of winning it all, but the road is only getting harder. He's already done enough to be called the best player of his era, but if the next 10 years end the same way that the last 10 have, that title might come with a permanent asterisk. Because at some point, the numbers stop mattering, and all anyone's gonna remember is whether or not you won.